Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. Today, we're going to talk about Hurricane Erin, which is weakening this morning. It's now down from a major hurricane. It's a Category 2, and it's probably going to weaken further, but that's not going to stop the impacts that will likely be felt along the outer banks of North Carolina, where this morning tropical storm warnings are now issued for the coast. I'm going to go over what the latest stats are on Erin and all the potential impacts that might be felt to the U.S. coastline, even though Erin obviously will not make a direct landfall on the United States. There's a lot to go over this morning, so let's get started immediately with Hurricane Erin, latest satellite image, and obviously as I mentioned before, it is beginning to weaken now, even more than it was weakening from yesterday. And it's all thanks to very, very strong northerly shear that has absolutely decimated the storm. In fact, you can literally see the low-level center is now pretty much visible from the visible satellite imagery. So shear is very much taken a toll on the storm. The inner eye wall has pretty much completely collapsed, which is why Erin is now collapsing itself. Is now currently a Category 2 hurricane after just yesterday morning, obviously being a Category 4. And I wouldn't be surprised if it weakens further. Although as it progresses here over the next several days, would not be surprised if it tries to intensify once again, although it probably will not intensify much. But the biggest issue that we're going to talk about here over the next several days will not be how strong of a storm Erin will be, because the focus is not going to be on intensity, but it's going to be on impacts that'll be brought to especially the Outer Banks of North Carolina, since this will pass very close to the coast and potentially pass even closer. I mean, the models just continue to shift west with the storm, and I mentioned this a few days ago that the more westerly wobbles we have with Erin, the more it's just going to cause problems, especially for the United States. Even though this won't make a landfall, it's very likely that impacts will be felt now. And I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again. We're going to go over it throughout the entire video. But tropical storm warnings are now in effect. Storm surge warnings are also in effect, and I'll read all the watches and warnings in effect for the coastline, many of them for North Carolina, and we even have still some tropical storm watches and warnings in effect for the Bahamas. But at least on the intensity front, Erin is doing much weaker, which is obviously a good thing. We're no longer talking about a major hurricane, although it is still a large and very impactful hurricane right now. And once again, it's because of this, is the fact that the core of Erin has completely collapsed. In fact, there is pretty much no more inner core anymore. All there is just some banding left and maybe some blob right next to the inner core of Erin. But the eye wall of the storm is completely collapsed and no longer has a well-developed eye or well-developed structure like it had a few days ago, even as recent as yesterday morning. So obviously it is weakened considerably. Once again, is down to a Category 2, latest National Hurricane Center advisory as of 11 a.m., which came out just minutes ago, 105 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 961 millibars. It's located at 25.6 north and 72.4 west, and it is moving northwest at 9 miles per hour. And that's another factor, too, that has also thrown a lot of people by surprise, is the fact that this is weakened or this is slowed down quite considerably, especially when it was passing just north of the islands about a few days ago. This was moving at like 21 miles an hour, and now it's slowed down to 9 miles an hour. Maybe that had an impact too in why this is weakening, because it's likely feeling the impacts of upwelling from, there's so much energy that hurricanes use, and over time that they just keep on churning up the water. Eventually the water cools quite a bit, and that's probably having a negative impact on Erin right now. And it's probably also, which is what's led to lots of dry air and definitely not helping with the wind shear it's battling. And obviously all of these factors have contributed to Erin weakening quite a bit. And it's probably going to weaken further. Maybe it'll hold off as a Category 2 as it then starts to move north and passes. As it passes just east of the Carolinas, we're going to talk about maybe a Category 1 or 2 hurricane that we're going to deal with from Erin. But the actual intensity of the storm really won't matter too much. Once again, the impacts will mainly be the focal point of what we're going to see, because even as the storm is weakening, Erin is still getting larger. Its wind field is still expanding, and that is obviously what is going to be the biggest issue for the Carolinas, is the fact that this will have a huge wind field that we will be seeing tropical storm force winds and probably some heavy rain and gusty winds for the Carolinas coast. But really quickly, before we move on, I do want to mention there are a few other things to watch today. We have an area of interest here in the central Atlantic. This has a 60% chance of development, and this will definitely be an area that we need to watch over the next several days, because the models do show some development out of this. They're not fully 100% on board that something will happen, but some of the models still show something will happen. And obviously it's August 19th. We're pretty much right on the door of the peak of the hurricane season. And really it's already begun. So obviously you have to watch everything that happens in the tropics, especially during the peak of the hurricane season. So we're going to be watching this very closely. There's also another area of interest that also just emerged off of Africa and has a 30% chance of development, and it's already been tagged Invest 99L, and this is actually drew quite a bit of attention this morning because it looked quite interesting, and I'll show you a satellite imagery picture of it towards the end of the video, but obviously the main focus of today's video will be Hurricane Erin. And really quickly to go over, it's tracked from the National Hurricane Center. This is obviously going to track out to sea. It will not be a direct U.S. landfall, and I just want to emphasize that one final time. We are not looking at a direct landfall from Hurricane Erin, but the biggest issue will be its wind field, because look at how large it is. Definitely much larger than when it was just north of the islands and north of Puerto Rico about 2 days ago. It was like very small. It was probably a third of the size that it is right now. And that wind field is definitely going to be large enough, and it's only going to get larger from here on out, that there will be tropical storm conditions felt along the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and maybe even for portions of Virginia too. And in fact, let me read you out all the watches and warnings that have been issued now for Erin, and we've definitely had a lot of these. I think the 11 a.m. advisory, this advisory is just now is the one that added a bunch of tropical storm warnings for the North Carolina Outer Banks, and in fact, it actually says that as the headline here. Storm surge and tropical storm warnings issued for the North Carolina Outer Banks. So I guess this recent advisory, 11 a.m., is when all of these warnings were issued. So a summary of the watches and warnings in effect. A storm surge warning is in effect for Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina. So this is for North Carolina. There are also tropical storm warnings in effect for the Turks and Caicos Islands, Southeast Bahamas, and Beaufort Inlet to Duck, North Carolina. So once again, North Carolina coast, tropical storm warnings. Tropical storm watches are still in effect for the Central Bahamas, and north of Duck, North Carolina to Cape Charles Light, Virginia. So Virginia as well is now in the tropical storm watch area as of the 11 a.m. advisory. And just to refresh your memory, a tropical storm warning means that tropical storm conditions are expected somewhere within the warning area within the next 36 hours. So probably starting tomorrow, we're going to start seeing tropical storm conditions for portions of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And tropical storm watches means that tropical storm conditions are possible within the watch area, generally within 48 hours. And we're definitely well within 48 hours of when we're probably going to start seeing tropical storm conditions in effect. But the interesting thing that I really find quite interesting, and this is something that you should not throw aside at all, is the fact that we now have storm surge warnings in effect for portions of the coast of North Carolina. And I'll show you the peak surge in just a little bit, but there will actually be some pretty decent surge for portions of North Carolina, and lots of very high waves too. I mean, that's kind of what you would expect with a storm like Erin. We have humongous waves, and I'll actually show you the GFS as well. The wave heights expected here just off the East Coast are going to be quite incredible. And it's all going to lead to storm surge along the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and that in itself will probably lead to beach erosion. I also mentioned yesterday too that we had very high rip current risks, and the rip currents are still very high today. But yesterday, I think in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, there were 50 rip current related rescues made alone in Wrightsville Beach alone, and just you can imagine we have a full coastline of North Carolina, and just one beach alone, there were 50 rescues. I can only imagine how many more there were along the rest of the coast. And I all mention this because these are all impacts. Again, just because of the fact that Erin is not going to make a landfall does not mean that there will not be impacts. And as I'm showing you here with tropical storm force wind speed probabilities, tropical storm force winds have a pretty decent chance of occurring along the North Carolina coast. It's now up to a 20 to 30% chance that we'll get tropical storm force winds along the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And I think about yesterday when I showed this map, it was only at 10 to 20% chance. So the chance of tropical storm force winds is looking to be pretty decent here. And of course, storm surge is going to be another issue as well. From all the way from South Santee River, South Carolina to Paramore Island, and kind of heading into the Chesapeake Bay here in Virginia, we might see up to 3 feet of storm surge, but especially, once again, right along the Outer Banks of North Carolina from Cape Lookout to Duck, North Carolina. The National Hurricane Center is forecasting 2 to 4 feet of storm surge. Now, that's not, crazy storm surge like we see in Helene, where we had up to 15 to 20 feet, or Michael, or I don't know, some crazy storm like Laura or even Katrina. But 2 to 4 feet, that still causes flooding, that still causes beach erosion, and if you are not careful, it could still take your life. So please do not throw aside the fact that we have storm surge and also flooding rain too. There will be quite a bit of rainfall for portions of eastern North Carolina and coastal North Carolina over the next several days. And I want to show you the wave heights in a little bit, but I want to show you the GFS. Obviously, the storm is brought out to sea, still heading more northwest right now, but as we head into tomorrow, this will probably start to take a little bit more of a northerly direction, and then once this starts approaching the North Carolina coast, it'll eventually then bend out to sea. But this, once again, will be large enough that even though that this will be turning out to sea by the time we head into Thursday, tropical storm force winds will probably be felt along the coast. And just really quickly wanted to show you that. And then as we head into Friday, then Erin kind of moves out and then just moves northeast over the northern Atlantic. And then, as you can see, we start seeing our next area of interest here in the central Atlantic come into frame. And this also tries to develop as we head into the end of the week. And at least this run of the GFS, I guess the weakness in the ridge is still large enough that this area here will probably turn out to sea, and we won't have to worry about any direct impacts from this. Although you never know, things could still very much change, and obviously as I go a little bit further than just 7 days, the GFS definitely develops this. So we'll watch this to see if it develops, and we'll obviously see if things change over the next week, which they still very much can. In fact, I saw a tweet today that shows just how much of a westward shift we've seen in the track with Erin in the last week. And I actually showed you this yesterday, a tweet where at 7 days ago, Erin was around, sometime this week around Wednesday, the forecast position for Erin, at least by the GFS model, was pretty much supposed to be what the GFS has right here. Was by Wednesday this week, by the middle of this week, Erin was already supposed to be all the way out in the northern Atlantic. But now, obviously, as it's now playing out right now, as we head into the middle of the week, Erin is only just going to be passing very close to the North Carolina coast. So we had such a dramatic shift west in the models over the last week with Erin. And who's to say that that won't happen with whatever system we're going to track afterward from Erin as well. So we're going to have to watch this very closely over the next week. But Erin is then going to move out as we head towards the end of the week. But while it moves by, I just want to show you significant wave height. And this is the forecasted wave heights for Erin as it moves right off the east coast of North Carolina and the east coast. And look at how high these waves are. Right here, just off the coast of North Carolina, the GFS forecasting waves as high as 20 feet. And within the storm itself, the wave heights get as high as 40, even 50, and probably even 60 feet in some cases. So incredibly high waves, and especially because a lot of these high waves will be very close to the coast. Obviously, that'll lead to some storm surge along the coast and beach erosion, all of that. And those are all impacts, too, that you can't throw aside. So gotta watch here off the Carolinas coast over the next several days, as once again, it's looking like we will get impacts from Erin. But really quickly, before I want to end off, obviously we talked about Erin today, but there are obviously things going on in the Atlantic too. We have two other areas of interest here in the Central Atlantic, and also here in the Eastern Atlantic. And this Eastern Atlantic area here is Invest 99L. And I'm pretty sure that this Central Atlantic area here will also be given an Invest shortly. When it does, it'll get the number 90L, because we designate Invests on a cycle of the numbers 90 through 99, and then every time we reach the end, we end up going back to 90 and we restart. Kind of like how we do designation with names, although with names we have a list of 21 names and we go through each name, and most of the time we don't cycle through the list. But with Invests, we cycle through as many times we need until the season ends. So this is going to be 99L. And this area here, if it gets designated, although I think it will get designated, will be 90L. And really quickly, just want to focus in on 99L because this has actually gained quite a bit of attention today. Seen a lot of people talk about it, and that's because, as you can see, definitely looks a little bit interesting. There's definitely a pretty aggressive low-level vortex in here. I've even seen some people say that this might already be a tropical depression. I don't know about that, but definitely has some pretty nice convective activity with it. Definitely has a nice aggressive low-level center, and this is going to have at least a few days of warmish warmish sea surface temperatures out here in the far eastern Atlantic. And I mean, this will be kind of low-level riding. This is not going to be north of the Cabo Verde Islands like Erin was, so it's not going to be in the Saharan air, although eventually Saharan air over the next few days will catch up to it. But in the meanwhile, definitely an interesting looking thing. We'll see if it tries to develop. And obviously, you can't rule out that possibility. It's August 19th after all. We're now starting to get into the peak of the hurricane season, so pretty much anything can happen. And pretty much anything is happening right now. And obviously the biggest thing will be Erin, which we'll be continuing to monitor over the next several days here, especially as this heads near North Carolina, and obviously will bring impacts. So obviously because of that, today is not going to be my only video, or this video is not going to be my only video for today. So if you like what you saw today, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bells, because I will be posting multiple updates throughout the day today, not only here on YouTube, but on Twitter as well. So make sure to follow me on Twitter too, @Danilo Evangelista, and follow me on YouTube here, subscribe, and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you can get videos the moment I upload them. But with that being said, I'm going to end it off for this video for now. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I will talk to you later.